Humanity won the alien species professional carving competition. What did humanity do to win? The planet Nixia loomed in the distance, a barren rock, far from the bustling interstellar trade routes, shrouded in a blanket of silence. It was a place few visited, its desolate landscape carved by centuries of erosion and neglect. Yet this forsaken world had become the focal point of an ambitious expedition. Deep within Nixia's heart, a discovery was waiting to rewrite history. Seren stood at the forefront of the excavation, her silhouette bathed in the cold pale light of the distant star. The planet's rugged surface stretched before her, like an ancient battlefield, the jagged terrain, torn by violent winds. Nixia's surface was devoid of life, its arid soil cracked and lifeless, yet beneath its crust something pulsed, an enigma that had eluded the galaxy's greatest minds for centuries. The artifact, as the team had called it, was buried in the deepest chasm on Nixia, a location that had taken months of labor to reach. For weeks, Saren, Eni, and Xander had camped on the barren world, their only company, the whistling winds and the hum of their equipment. The three members of the research team had meticulously mapped the planet, using advanced sensors and tools to locate the anomaly that had sent tremors through the scientific community. The scans had revealed a massive object buried beneath the layers of dirt and stone, one that defied all known logic and technology. Seren, a calm and thoughtful woman with eyes as deep and dark as the void itself, felt a mixture of excitement and unease. She was no stranger to the mysteries of the universe, having studied countless civilizations and artifacts, but nothing had prepared her for this. It was as if the artifact itself was calling to her, an ancient voice echoing across time and space. The excavation began with the roar of machines cutting into the hardened earth. The process was slow and methodical. They had to be careful. The artifact was buried deep within a rocky chasm, and they had no idea what they were truly dealing with. The team worked tirelessly, their hands trembling with a mixture of anticipation and anxiety as they unearthed the first pieces of the object. What they found was beyond anything they could have imagined. The artifact was a massive elongated structure, unlike anything seen in human or alien design. At first glance, it appeared to be a blend of smooth metallic surfaces and jagged crystalline growths, as though two opposing forces had collided to create something entirely new. The outer surface was covered in strange markings, patterns that shifted and writhed when viewed from different angles. These symbols, seemingly alive, pulsed with a faint, eerie light. They gave off an iridescent glow, their colors shifting from deep purple to an unsettling shade of green, as if responding to the team's presence. Saren felt her pulse quicken as she approached, her eyes locked on the glowing runes. The object was far too complex and sophisticated to be of human origin. Its form was fluid and organic, yet undeniably technological, an intricate fusion of biology and machinery. It seemed to resonate with an otherworldly energy that sent chills down the spine. The surface of the artifact felt strangely warm to the touch despite the planet's freezing temperature. When the team touched it, there was a subtle hum, almost imperceptible, that vibrated through their bodies. For days, the team analyzed the object from every angle. They carefully removed layers of debris and dirt, revealing its true shape. The artifact was not just an object, it was a conduit, an engine, a door to something else. It was as though it were a fragment of a forgotten civilization, something far older than any known race, and yet somehow it seemed familiar. Saren was particularly drawn to a set of symbols etched into one of its panels. The writing was unlike any language they had encountered, but it was clear it wasn't random. She traced her fingers along the markings, feeling an inexplicable pull, a connection that was impossible to explain. There was a pattern, a rhythm embedded in the symbols. The shapes seemed to form a sequence, one that resonated with her on a level that she couldn't quite comprehend. She glanced over at Annie and Xander, who were too engrossed in their own analysis to notice the strange reaction. "Do you feel that?" Saren asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Annie looked up from his equipment, his brow furrowed in curiosity. "What do you mean?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she let her hand hover over the symbols once again. The hum grew louder, almost as if the artifact was awakening. The strange energy emanated from it, filling the air with a tangible sense of mystery. Saren felt a sudden surge of memories flash before her eyes. Visions of distant worlds, forgotten voices, and flashes of a future she hadn't yet lived. It was as if she were glimpsing a reflection of her own existence from another timeline. Xander, ever the pragmatic strategist, noticed her growing unease. "You all right?" he asked, his voice tinged with concern. Despite his usual stoic demeanor, even he couldn't deny the strange atmosphere surrounding the artifact. Something about it seemed wrong. "I don't know," Seren replied, her voice distant. "There's something about this place, about this object. I feel like I've been here before, like I'm meant to be here." The tension was palpable as the team worked to carefully extract the artifact from the ground. It was massive, and the surrounding soil had to be cleared inch by inch. The strange markings on its surface became more intricate as they uncovered more of the structure. Eventually, they reached what appeared to be a central chamber within the artifact. It was a hollowed-out space that had remained perfectly preserved, untouched by time. Inside the chamber lay a crystalline object suspended in the air by an unseen force. It glowed with the same ethereal light as the artifact's surface. The team stood in awe before the object, unsure whether to approach or to retreat. Seren felt a strong pull toward it, as if the object was calling to her directly. She reached out her fingers, brushing against the surface of the crystal, and the moment she made contact, the world around her seemed to warp. A brilliant flash of light engulfed her, and for a split second, everything was silent. The world seemed to pause, as if time itself had ceased to exist. Then just as quickly, the light faded, leaving Seren standing alone in the chamber. Her heart raced and her breath came in sharp gasps. She had felt something, an immense connection, an understanding that defied logic. "What was that?" Annie asked, his voice a mixture of awe and concern. "I don't know," Seren whispered, her voice barely audible. "But I think we've just uncovered something. Something far more than we ever expected." As the team gathered around her, the weight of the moment began to sink in. They were on the precipice of something monumental. The discovery of the artifact on Nixia wasn't just a scientific breakthrough. It was a doorway to the unknown, a bridge to a reality that could change everything they thought they knew about the universe. But as Seren stood there, her hands still hovering over the crystal, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of something much more dangerous. She had a deep, unsettling suspicion that the artifact was more than just an ancient relic. It was a key to something far beyond their comprehension, and that key was now in their hands. The morning light on Nixia was always cold, filtering through the dust-laden atmosphere with a pale, ethereal glow. It cast long shadows over the excavation site, where the artifact lay partially unearthed, as if resting, waiting for something or someone to awaken it. Seren stood in front of the object again, staring at its surface with a mix of awe and concern. Something was wrong, but she couldn't put her finger on it yet. As she and the team continued their work, something strange began to happen. A low hum emanated from the artifact, almost imperceptible at first, but steadily growing louder. It was as if the object had become alive, stirring from a long slumber. The air around them began to feel heavier, charged with a strange electric energy. The ground beneath their feet vibrated, faint tremors running through the rock, causing small dust clouds to rise from the cracks in the surface. Any who was operating the nearby equipment immediately noticed the anomaly. "Seren, you feel that?" he asked, his voice tense. "The readings are all over the place. Something's wrong." Seren looked up, her eyes narrowing as she focused on the artifact. "Yes," she whispered. "It's like it's waking up. But why now? We haven't even activated it fully yet." Xander, always alert to potential threats, stepped closer to the object, his gaze sharp. "We should be cautious," he warned. "This isn't normal. Whatever's happening, it could be dangerous." As the hum grew louder, the strange energy readings on their equipment spiked dramatically. The devices meant to measure energy levels, and radiation began to flicker wildly, displaying numbers that made no sense. Seren checked her datapad, eyes scanning rapidly. The readings were fluctuating wildly, far beyond what any of their technology was capable of processing. "This isn't possible," Seren muttered to herself. "It's like it's feeding off the environment. But that doesn't make any sense." Xander glanced at her, his expression unreadable. "What does that mean?" "It means this thing," Seren said, turning back to face the artifact, "isn't just a piece of ancient technology. It's alive in some way, and it's drawing energy from everything around it. This could be catastrophic if we don't figure out how to control it." And he continued to monitor the readings, his brow furrowed in concentration. The energy fluctuations are getting more extreme. If this keeps up, it could destabilize the entire excavation site. Xander's eyes narrowed as he stepped back, eyeing the ground beneath him. We need to back off now. Whatever this thing is, we don't know enough about it yet. The last thing we want is to cause an accident. Seren hesitated, her fingers twitching towards the artifact. She felt a strange, almost irresistible pull towards it, but she knew Xander was right. They had to be careful. She took a deep breath and stepped back reluctantly. Okay, but we need answers. We can't just leave this here. The team began to move back, leaving a wide space between them and the artifact. As they retreated, the air seemed to lighten, the pressure that had built up in the atmosphere easing just slightly. Seren kept her eyes on the object, her mind racing. She couldn't shake the feeling that it was calling to her, pulling her in. The artifact had become more than just a discovery, it had become a force. We need to study it more. Seren finally said, her voice steady but tinged with worry. But we'll have to do it from a safe distance. Annie nodded, still focused on his readings. Yeah, we can't risk it until we know more. We're not even sure how it works. Xander turned to look at the others, his voice low and serious. Let's keep a close eye on it. If things go wrong, we need to be ready to pull back fast. Understood. The team nodded, each of them feeling the weight of the situation. There was no turning back now. The artifact was awake, and with it a power they could barely comprehend was beginning to stir. The nights on Nixia were long and eerie, with the wind howling across the barren landscape like a ghostly whisper. Seren's quarters were sparse, a small room that overlooked the excavation site where the artifact lay dormant but still pulsing with an eerie energy. It was here that the dreams began. At first they were faint, fleeting images, just flashes of strange symbols, alien landscapes and fleeting figures. But as the nights wore on, the dreams grew more vivid. Seren would find herself standing before the artifact, her hand reaching out to touch it, only for the scene to shift in a surreal blur, pulling her into another world. In one particularly unsettling dream, she was walking through a city made of sleek metallic towers, their surfaces reflecting a sky that shimmered with strange constellations. The streets were silent, devoid of life, and yet Seren could feel a presence, something watching her, something familiar. The moment she turned a corner, the city transformed into a vast open field, where the artifact lay in the center, glowing with a blinding light. She could never reach it, though. Every time she tried to step forward, she was pulled back by an unseen force, as if something was preventing her from getting closer. And just as she was about to turn and leave, she would wake up drenched in sweat, her heart pounding in her chest. At first, Seren tried to dismiss the dreams as mere stress or side effects from the artifact's energy. But as they continued, they began to feel too real, too vivid to ignore. She started to wake up with a strange sense of déjà vu, as though she had experienced the same moments before, like the dreams were fragments of a reality she had forgotten. I don't understand it, Seren confessed one morning to Annie, who was working alongside her at the excavation site. Her voice was shaky, the weight of the dreams heavy on her mind. It's like I'm being pulled into that place, into the artifact itself. I've never felt anything like it before. Annie looked at her with a mix of concern and curiosity. He had noticed her increasingly erratic behavior over the past few days, slightly distracted, often lost in thought and murmuring to herself. He hadn't said anything yet, but now he could see how much it was affecting her. Seren, maybe you should take a break, he suggested gently, his voice low. You've been pushing yourself pretty hard lately. This artifact, it's a lot to process. Seren shook her head, frustration evident on her face. I can't. It's like it's calling to me. I need to understand it. I need to know what it wants. Xander, overhearing the conversation, walked over and placed a firm hand on her shoulder. I know you want answers, but you need to stay focused. Seren, the rest of us are here to help you, but you need to keep it together. Seren flinched, her body tensing at his touch. It was a strange reaction, one that didn't escape Xander's notice. Her behavior had become more unpredictable in recent days, and he couldn't help but feel that the artifact was affecting her more than they realized. I'm fine, Seren said quickly, pulling away from him. I just need to figure this out. Over the next few days, Seren's behavior grew more erratic. She would often wander off into the barren landscape surrounding the excavation site, staring off into the distance as if listening for something only she could hear. At times she would speak in fragmented sentences as though having a conversation with someone unseen. "What do you think it wants?" Seren murmured to herself one afternoon as she stared at the artifact, her hand outstretched as if trying to reach out to it. "What are you trying to tell me?" The team began to worry. It wasn't just the dreams anymore. It was the way Seren seemed to be unraveling, losing touch with reality. Annie suggested that they bring in a specialist to examine her, but Xander was hesitant. "She's too connected to this mission," he argued. "If we pull her out now, it could disrupt everything. But we can't let her spiral out of control." Annie insisted. "We need to do something, Xander. This is bigger than just the mission." Xander looked at Seren, his expression conflicted. He knew Annie was right, but he also understood the stakes. If Seren was truly linked to the artifact in a way they didn't understand, taking her away from it might have consequences far beyond what they could imagine. The night of the full moon on Nixia arrived with an eerie stillness that hung in the air. The twin moons, which rarely align, cast their silvery light over the barren landscape, illuminating the excavation site where the artifact lay dormant. The team had gathered in anticipation, knowing that this night, this very night, held significance. For centuries, many cultures on Earth had believed that the full moon was a time when mystical energies were at their peak, a night when the veil between worlds thinned. Seren, Annie, and Xander stood in silence, their eyes fixed on the artifact. There was a palpable tension in the air, a sense of anticipation that made the hairs on their necks stand on end. Despite all their knowledge, they could not deny the strange aura that surrounded the object. Tonight they would finally understand what it truly was. "Are we sure about this?" Annie asked, his voice low and filled with caution. He couldn't shake the feeling that something monumental was about to happen. "This could change everything." "It's the full moon tonight," Seren replied, her voice calm, though her eyes betrayed a flicker of uncertainty. "If there's any night this artifact will show us what it's capable of, it's tonight." Xander, always the strategist, studied the artifact closely, his eyes scanning its surface. He had his doubts, but he could sense something powerful was stirring inside it. "We'll wait until midnight," he said firmly, his tone resolute. "We need to be ready for whatever happens." Midnight approached, and the energy in the air seemed to intensify. It was as if the very fabric of reality was holding its breath, waiting for something to shift. The artifact, still in its dormant state, appeared to pulse with increasing frequency. A low hum emanated from it, vibrating through the ground beneath their feet. "It's happening," Seren murmured, her voice almost a whisper. Her heart was pounding in her chest, and she felt an overwhelming sense of anticipation. As the clock struck midnight, the artifact suddenly came to life. The hum intensified, and the air grew thick with energy. Then, without warning, the surface of the artifact rippled, and a crackling sound filled the air. The object seemed to stretch its shape, warping, as though it were preparing to open. The ground shook beneath them, and the entire excavation site seemed to vibrate with power. The team watched in awe as a swirling vortex began to form in the center of the artifact. Light exploded from within, bathing the surroundings in a bright, almost blinding glow. "It's opening! A portal!" Xander said, his voice thick with disbelief. He had expected something significant, but this was beyond anything he could have imagined. The swirling light intensified, and before their eyes the vortex expanded, revealing a strange alien world beyond it. They could see versions of themselves standing in this parallel universe, versions that were subtly different, yet undeniably familiar. Each of them was doing something slightly different. Xander was standing by a console. Annie was looking out over a vast city, and Seren was working on something. She couldn't tell what. Seren took a step forward, drawn toward the vision of herself in this other reality. The images flickered and shifted fast and disorienting, but then everything became clear. She saw herself standing before the artifact, her hands glowing as she worked on it, constructing it, creating it. "No!" she whispered, a cold chill running down her spine. I created it. I made this." The revelation hit her like a tidal wave, and she stumbled back, her mind racing. The others noticed the change in her demeanor. Seren was shaken, her face pale as she looked between the artifact and the portal, her breath shallow. "What's happening to her?" Annie asked, his voice filled with concern as he reached out to steady Seren. Xander looked at the portal, then back at Seren, his mind racing. "I don't know, but I think she just remembered something. something that ties her to that world. Seren, still stunned, shook her head. I, I think I was the one who created this artifact in another life, in another universe. Her voice trembled as she spoke, the weight of the revelation sinking in. I was the one who built it, and now it's come back to me. The team stood in silence, processing what had just happened. The reality of the situation was sinking in. What they had uncovered was not just a discovery, but a direct link to a parallel universe. And Seren was at the center of it all. The calm that had followed the portal's opening was short-lived. Almost immediately, the environment around the artifact began to shift. The air grew thick with an oppressive energy that made it harder to breathe, as if the very atmosphere was becoming more volatile. The ground beneath their feet seemed to tremble, the vibrations subtle at first but growing stronger with each passing moment. Seren felt at first the creeping sense of unease, a weight pressing on her chest. She looked up at the portal, which now flickered with unsettling light. The images from the parallel universe, which had been clear moments ago, were becoming distorted. The air shimmered with rippling waves of energy. "This isn't good," Xander muttered, his eyes scanning the portal with growing concern. "The portal's unstable. It's not just showing us images anymore, it's warping reality." As the minutes passed, the changes in both worlds became more pronounced. On Nixia, the ground shook violently, causing cracks to form in the surface. The once still winds began to howl as if swept up in a violent storm that had no clear origin. The sky above them darkened, swirling with ominous clouds that seemed to pulse in rhythm with the artifact. In the parallel universe, the distortion became even more alarming. Cities that once appeared vibrant now seemed to flicker and glitch, their structures twisting and warping as if being torn apart by an unseen force. People once calm and confident now appeared panicked, their movements jerky as though trapped in some kind of nightmare. "We're seeing it. Both worlds are destabilizing," Seren whispered, her voice trembling. She stepped closer to the portal, unable to tear her eyes away from the images flashing before her. Her heart was pounding in her chest. "It's all connected. It's me. I did this." Annie moved beside her, his face a mix of fear and determination. What do you mean, what's happening?" Seren's mind raced as flashes of her past lives flooded her thoughts, visions of her standing before the artifact, building it, creating it in a world that had no connection to their own. The images were overwhelming, a torrent of memories she could not control. I, I was the one who created the artifact." Seren gasped, her voice barely audible. "I built it in another life, in another universe, and now it's destabilizing everything, both worlds." Xander, still watching the portal, his face taut with concern, turned sharply toward her. "You built it, but why? What does it all mean?" Seren shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. "I don't know. It's like I'm remembering something I've forgotten, but I don't know how to stop it." The rumbling beneath their feet intensified, shaking them to the core. The sky above them seemed to ripple as the vortex within the artifact expanded, sucking in more energy from the surrounding world. The air was thick with static, and a low growl like the roar of an ancient beast echoed in the distance. "It's awakening," Seren whispered, her eyes wide with fear. "The forces we've disturbed, they're waking up." Suddenly, the sky above them split open, revealing a terrifying dark rift that stretched across the heavens. From within the rift, enormous shadowy figures began to emerge, ancient beings, their forms vast and incomprehensible, their eyes glowing with a malevolent light. "We need to stop this," Xander shouted, his voice strained. "We need to destroy the artifact before it's too late." Seren stood frozen, her gaze locked on the figures emerging from the rift. I don't know if I can," she whispered. "I created this. I have to be the one to stop it." The ground beneath them trembled violently, and the distant roar of the awakening entities grew louder, reverberating through the very fabric of reality. The artifact's power had reached a critical point, and the team knew they were running out of time. Seren stood before the portal, her mind racing, the flood of images growing stronger, overwhelming her senses. The visions came so fast now, one after another, as though time itself was no longer a constant. She saw herself, or rather a version of herself, standing in front of a grand ancient throne room. The room was filled with strange symbols and intricate designs, the air thick with the weight of centuries of history. She was young, full of determination, and standing before a king, her king. You must create it, the king's voice echoed in her mind. It is the only way to secure my reign. You will forge the artifact, and with it, I shall expand my power across all worlds. Seren felt the weight of the command pressing down on her. She had no choice. The king's will was absolute, and she, like everyone else in his court, had to obey. But as she stood there, gazing at the swirling energy that would become the artifact, she felt a deep sense of unease. Something was wrong, but she could not understand what. The artifact will be your legacy. The king continued, his voice cold and commanding. It will grant me dominion over all realms, and your name will be remembered as the one who crafted it. The vision shifted, and suddenly Seren found herself in the chamber where the artifact was being forged. The air was thick with energy, crackling and humming as she manipulated strange, unknown materials, her hands guided by the ancient power that had filled the room. She could feel it, the energy swirling around her, bending to her will. It was exhilarating, terrifying, and intoxicating all at once. She had become part of the artifact's creation, entwined with its very essence. But as the artifact took shape, something began to change in Seren. The more she worked on it, the more she felt herself slipping away. Her thoughts were no longer her own, but whispers, commands from the king, that seemed to grow stronger with every passing moment. She worked tirelessly, her body moving of its own accord, and before long the artifact was complete. But as the final piece was placed into position, a terrible realization struck her. This was no simple machine. It was a weapon, a tool of unimaginable power, designed to control and subjugate entire worlds. The king was right, it would give him the power he sought. But at what cost? Seren felt a deep unease as she realized that the artifact's true purpose was far darker than she had ever imagined. It was not just about power, it was about controlled destruction and domination. The vision flashed forward, and she saw herself in the present day, standing at the artifact once again. But now the scene was different. The artifact was no longer just a tool, it was a harbinger of destruction, pulling at the very fabric of reality itself. I've made a terrible mistake, Seren whispered to herself, the weight of her past actions bearing down on her. I never should have created it. Now both worlds are at risk. As the memories continued to flood her mind, Seren realized the full scope of what she had done. The artifact was not just a creation, it was a catalyst for destruction, and she had unwittingly set it in motion. The king's desire for power had led her to forge a tool that could destroy everything, and now it was threatening to tear both universes apart. I have to stop it, Seren murmured, her voice trembling with guilt and fear. I have to destroy it before it's too late. The portal flickered again, and this time the images that flooded her mind were not just of the past but of the future. She saw the consequences of her actions, worlds falling into ruin, civilizations crumbling, and the endless cycle of destruction repeating itself. This can't happen, Seren whispered desperately. I won't let it. I'll find a way to undo this. The air around them was thick with tension, the very atmosphere seeming to crackle with energy. The portal flickered violently, and the images from the parallel universe began to distort and shift as though the world beyond was unstable, collapsing in on itself. The three of them stood in the center of it, each struggling with their own thoughts, their own emotions. We need to understand it. Annie said, his voice calm yet insistent. He was the engineer, after all, the one who thrived on knowledge, on finding solutions through analysis and study. This is an opportunity to learn something that could change everything. We can't just destroy it without knowing what it really is. Xander's face hardened, his jaw set in a firm line. And how many more lives do we risk while you study it? The longer we wait, the worse it gets. We've already seen what happens when it destabilizes. It's too dangerous to keep experimenting. Xander, you're not hearing me. Annie shot back, his tone rising. We can't just go on destroying things because they're dangerous. We need to understand it, or we'll never be able to control it. If we don't, we'll be making decisions in the dark. Seren stood between them, her hands trembling as she tried to piece together the growing confusion in her mind. She knew both of them were right, but she couldn't find a way to reconcile their positions. The weight of the decision was crushing her, the responsibility of having created the artifact pressing down on her chest like an unbearable weight. I can't make this decision, Seren whispered, her voice barely audible. She looked up at the portal, her gaze filled with pain and uncertainty. I can't close it. I created it. but I can't stop it. Seren, you have to, Xander said, urgently stepping toward her. If you were the one who created it, then you're the only one who can stop it. You have to make a choice. Seren's eyes were wide with fear, her breath shallow. I can't, she gasped. I know I created it, but I don't remember how. It's like I've forgotten everything about it. I feel like I'm drowning. The sky outside began to darken, clouds swirling in the atmosphere, growing thicker and heavier with each passing second. But none of them noticed. They were too wrapped up in their own struggle to see the changes happening around them. We're running out of time, Annie said, his voice strained. Every second we wait, this thing could be causing more damage. We need to act now. And what if we destroy it without understanding it? Xander countered. What if we make it worse? Seren stepped back, her mind reeling. She couldn't handle this anymore. The pain inside her, the crushing weight of her decisions was too much. She felt like she was being torn apart, her body frozen in place. I can't do this, Seren screamed, the agony in her voice so raw it was almost unbearable. She fell to her knees, clutching her head, as the flood of memories, the weight of her past life, crashed down on her all at once. The ground trembled beneath them, and the air thickened further, as though the very fabric of reality was starting to tear apart. The world around them began to warp, the space around them bending and distorting. The scene before them became a blur, as if the world itself was beginning to fracture, to unravel. It's starting, Seren whispered, her voice barely audible. Everything is coming apart. The team looked at each other in horror, realizing that the stakes were higher than ever before. Whatever decision they made, it seemed as though the universe was already paying the price. Seren stood before the portal once again, the weight of the decision pressing down on her. The air around her felt heavy, thick with the energy of both worlds, both realities. She could feel the pull of the artifact, the allure of the knowledge it contained, but she also felt the destruction it would bring. She knew what she had to do, but it terrified her. You're the only one who can do this. Seren. Annie's voice broke through her thoughts. His eyes were filled with concern, but there was also a faint trace of guilt, as if he felt responsible for what was happening. You created it. You can stop it. Seren turned to face him, her expression pained. I know, Annie. I know that, but you don't understand what this means. She paused, her gaze drifting back to the portal. I have to go back to the moment I created it. I have to stop myself. If I don't, both worlds will collapse. Xander stepped forward, his face hard with determination. And what about us? What about this world? He asked, his voice raw with emotion. You can't just throw everything away, Seren. We've come this far. I have no choice, Seren whispered, her voice barely audible. I created this mess. If I don't stop it now, it will destroy everything. This is the only way. Annie and Xander exchanged a glance, both of them struggling internally with the idea. They knew what Seren had to do, but neither of them wanted to accept the price. We can't let you do this alone, Xander said firmly. You can't do it alone. It's too dangerous. We're a team. We need to find another way. Seren shook her head, tears brimming in her eyes. I can't let you come with me. You'll be in danger. This is something I have to do. Only I can stop it. And if you fail, Annie's voice cracked, a mix of fear and frustration. What if you don't come back? What if you can't stop it? Seren's heart clenched, and for a moment she didn't know how to respond. Her mind flashed back to the parallel universe, the version of herself that had created the artifact in the first place. She could still hear the king's voice in her head commanding her to build the device. The same king whose thirst for power had led her to make a decision that would haunt her for the rest of her life. If I fail, everything ends, Seren whispered, the weight of her decision pressing down on her. But if I succeed, I save both worlds. Xander closed his eyes, his hand gripping the edge of the artifact. He knew she was right, but the thought of losing her, of watching her walk into the unknown alone, was unbearable. You have to come back, he said softly. You have to. Seren turned to him, her eyes filled with sorrow. I don't know if I can, she admitted, her voice shaking. But I have to try. I have to fix what I've done. The air around them grew heavier, the sky darkening further as the rift in reality stretched wider, as if both worlds were on the brink of collapse. The ground beneath them trembled again, and this time the shaking was more violent, the sky above flashing with bursts of light. Go then! and he said softly, his voice full of sorrow. But remember, Seren, you're not alone. We'll be with you in spirit. We trust you. Seren nodded, her heart heavy with the weight of the decision. She turned toward the portal once more, feeling the pull of both worlds. She knew what she had to do. The moment Seren stepped into the portal, the sensation was overwhelming. It felt as if her very being was being stretched, pulled apart by an unseen force. The light that enveloped her was so bright it blinded her, a radiant burst that seemed to tear at her vision. It was hard to breathe, as though the very air had thickened, squeezing her chest with every breath. Her body felt as if it were being torn between two worlds, the rift in space and time, pulling her in every direction at once. She screamed, a sound lost in the blinding light as her body twisted and contorted. Every nerve in her being screamed in protest, but she knew she had no choice. This was the path she had to take, even if it meant leaving everything behind. Then, as suddenly as it began, the light began to fade, and Seren found herself standing in a completely new world. The air was cooler here, but still thick with a sense of ancient power. She looked around, trying to make sense of the landscape. The architecture that surrounded her was strikingly similar to the ancient Greek temples she had seen in Earth's history books. Tall marble columns stretched up into the sky, supporting vast, intricate structures. The buildings were grand and awe-inspiring, their surfaces covered in carvings and symbols that seemed to tell stories of a long-forgotten time. But as she took in the surroundings, she noticed something strange. Despite the ancient look of the buildings, the world around her was undeniably advanced. There were sleek, futuristic vehicles gliding through the streets, their designs far beyond anything seen on Earth. People walked by in clothing that was both modern and yet somehow classical, blending the old with the new in a way that felt both foreign and familiar. As Seren continued to walk, she marveled at the contrast between the ancient and the futuristic. She saw people engaged in conversations using devices that seemed to hover in midair, projecting holographic images and maps. There were vehicles that floated above the ground, their sleek forms moving with almost no sound. It was like a dream, a world that existed in a strange harmony between the past and the future. "This is unbelievable," Seren whispered to herself, taking it all in. "It's like Earth, but not. It's like I've stepped into another version of our world, a version where time has taken a completely different turn." As she walked further into the city, Seren couldn't help but feel a deep sense of déjà vu. Everything felt so familiar and yet so foreign at the same time. The people she passed on the streets were similar to those on Earth, yet there was something different about them. Something in their eyes, something in the way they moved. She approached a large structure at the center of the city. It resembled a temple, but the materials used to construct it were unlike anything she had ever seen. The walls seemed to shimmer with a faint ethereal glow, and the doors were adorned with symbols that looked almost alive, pulsing with a strange energy. She stepped inside, the air cool and filled with a hum of energy. The interior was vast, with high ceilings supported by marble columns. The floor was polished to a mirror-like shine, and the walls were covered in more of those strange symbols. There was a sense of power here, a weight that pressed down on her as she walked further into the temple. "This is it," Seren murmured, her voice barely audible. She could feel the presence of something ancient here, something that had been waiting for her. She stepped closer to the center of the temple, where a pedestal stood holding a glowing crystal. The crystal was identical to the one she had seen before, the one that had been part of the artifact. This was where it all began. This was where she had made the decision to create the artifact that had caused all of this. Seren rushed through the city, her heart pounding in her chest. She felt a strange sense of urgency, as though she were being guided by something beyond her understanding. The people around her stared, some with curiosity, others with confusion, but Seren didn't care. She was too focused on finding herself the version of her that had created the artifact. Her clothes were different from everyone else's. They were from a time far beyond this one, and it made her stick out like a sore thumb. But Seren didn't care. She had a purpose, and nothing else mattered. She followed her instincts, weaving through the crowded streets until she arrived at a small, modest house, tucked away in a quiet corner of the city. The house felt familiar to her, as if she had been there before. It was small, with ivy crawling up the sides and a wooden door that looked weathered with time. The moment she stepped onto the threshold, a wave of memories hit her like a tidal wave. though they were disjointed and fragmented. She had been here before. She knew it. Seren took a deep breath and knocked on the door, her hand trembling slightly. She didn't know what she expected, but she knew that this was the moment she had been waiting for. The door opened slowly, revealing a younger version of herself. The woman standing before her was in her early 20s, her eyes full of curiosity and caution, much like how Seren had been at that age. "Who are you?" the younger Seren asked, her voice filled with suspicion. "What do you want?" Seren's heart clenched as she saw the confusion and fear in her past self's eyes. "I'm you," she whispered, her voice shaky. "I've come from the future. I need you to listen to me." The younger Seren took a step back, her eyes widening in shock. "What? What are you talking about? You can't be me." "I am," Seren insisted, taking a step closer. "I'm the person who created the artifact, the thing you're working on right now, and I need to stop it." The younger Seren looked at her, confused and skeptical. "What are you talking about?" "The artifact is the key to everything. It will give us power. It will make us gods." "No," Seren's voice trembled with emotion. "You don't understand. It's not just a tool for power. It's a weapon. It will destroy both our worlds if we don't stop it now." The younger Seren shook her head, disbelief written all over her face. "You're wrong. You don't know what you're saying. This is our chance to change everything. We can't just let it go." Seren's eyes filled with tears as she reached out to her past self. "I know you think this is the right thing, but it's not. The artifact, it's not just a tool. It's a doorway. It's a link between our worlds, and if we don't stop it, everything will collapse." The younger Seren took a step back, fear creeping into her eyes. "But if we destroy it, everything we've worked for, everything we've built will be gone. Do you really want to throw all of that away?" Seren felt her heart breaking as she watched her past self struggle with the decision. She knew it was the right thing to do, but she also knew how hard it would be for her to accept it. "I don't want to destroy everything," she whispered, "but if we don't stop the artifact, it will destroy us all." The younger Seren hesitated, torn between the dream of power and the reality of destruction. Her hands trembled, and for a moment Seren saw the same fear in her past self's eyes that she had once felt. "What if we're wrong?" the younger Seren asked, her voice barely a whisper. "What if this is the only way forward?" Seren took a deep breath, her voice steady despite the weight of the moment. "We're not wrong. We're saving both our worlds. You have to trust me. You have to stop the artifact." "Aturi." The younger Seren looked at her for a long time, her eyes searching Seren's face for some sign of doubt, some crack in her resolve. But Seren knew there was no doubt. She had made up her mind, and she would not let this go any longer. Finally, the younger Seren stepped back, her shoulders sagging. "I don't want to do this," she said softly, her voice trembling. "But I see now that you're right. If we don't stop it, everything will fall apart." "Thank you," Seren whispered, her heart aching. "I promise we'll make it right. We'll fix everything." The younger Seren nodded, though the sadness in her eyes was clear. She had been part of the creation of the artifact, and now she had to help destroy it. "I never thought it would come to this," she said quietly, "but I trust you." The air around Seren was thick with tension, every breath she took feeling like it might be her last. The weight of the decision bore down on her, pressing against her chest like an invisible hand. She could feel the two realities shifting, colliding, as if the very fabric of the world was coming apart. Time felt frozen, yet simultaneously it was slipping away faster than she could grasp. The ticking of a clock in the distance was the only sound she could focus on, like a countdown to the inevitable. She stood between the two versions of herself, the young, hopeful version, full of ambition, and the older, battle-worn version who knew the price of creation and destruction. The artifact pulsed behind her, its energy vibrating through the ground, its very presence like a ticking clock counting down the moments until the worlds would collapse. The decision now lay in her hands, and the fate of two realities rested on the choice she would make. The younger Seren looked at her with confusion and fear in her eyes. "How can you just give up everything?" she asked, her voice shaky with disbelief. "We've worked so hard to create this. It's everything we've ever wanted." "No, it's not everything," Seren whispered, her voice barely audible. "It's a weapon, not a gift. It's going to destroy us and everything we care about. She stepped closer to the artifact, the pull of its power almost overwhelming. She had created it, but now faced with its true purpose, she realized the damage it could do. The young Seren shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. But we can't just throw away the future we've worked for. There must be another way. Her voice was a desperate plea, the weight of her ambition making it hard to accept the reality Seren was showing her. Seren felt a wave of grief wash over her. She could see the hope, the desperation in her past self's eyes. But she knew the truth. The artifact, no matter how beautiful or powerful it seemed, was not a tool of progress. It was a harbinger of destruction. I wish there was another way, Seren murmured, her voice breaking, but I know what this will lead to. If we don't stop it now, everything will be lost. Both worlds, both our futures, gone. The words came out heavy, filled with the pain of a decision she never wanted to make. The younger Seren took a step back, her face pale, a flicker of fear crossing her features. But if we destroy it, she started, her voice faltering. What if we never get to see the world we've always dreamed of? We're already seeing it, Seren replied softly, looking at the portal. This is the world we've created, a world on the edge of destruction. I won't let us be the ones to push it over the edge. The younger Seren stood there for a moment, her mind racing, her thoughts a storm of conflicting emotions. She had worked so hard to create the artifact, to make it something that could change the world. But now, faced with the reality of what it would do, she was frozen, unsure of what to believe. I can't destroy it, the younger Seren said, her voice breaking, a look of horror crossing her face. It's all we have left. It's everything we've worked for. Seren's heart broke as she looked at her past self. She knew how much it hurt to let go of something you had poured your soul into. But she also knew what had to be done. If you don't stop it, we'll both lose everything, Seren said, her voice full of conviction. The future we dreamed of, it will never come. The artifact isn't our salvation. It's our doom. The younger Seren looked up at her, tears streaming down her face. Then what do we do? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. How do we stop it? Seren stepped closer, placing a hand on her younger self's shoulder. We destroy it. Together. I can't do this without you. You have to help me. The younger Seren hesitated but then nodded. All right, she whispered. Let's do it. Let's stop it before it's too late. The ground beneath them began to tremble again, more violently than before. The air grew thick, and the space around them began to warp and twist, the world becoming unstable as the artifact pulsed with power. Seren knew time was running out. Now, Seren whispered urgently, we have to destroy it now. Together they moved toward the artifact, ready to end the cycle of destruction that had begun so long ago. Seren felt her pulse race as she approached the artifact, her fingers trembling, with the enormity of the choice before her. The weight of the decision hung in the air like a thick fog, suffocating her every thought. It was the moment she had been dreading, the moment when she would have to erase her very existence from the fabric of the universe. The power that emanated from the artifact was palpable, almost suffocating, and she knew it was the only thing standing between both worlds and total destruction. She glanced at her younger self, the version of her that still held on to the hope and ambition of what could be achieved with the artifact. The younger Seren's eyes were wide with disbelief, her expression twisted with a mix of fear and confusion. How can we destroy it? She asked, her voice shaky, as if the very thought was too much to bear. This is everything we've worked for. No, Seren said firmly, her voice filled with the weight of years of experience. This is not everything. It's a weapon, not a tool for progress. It will destroy everything if we allow it to exist. She stepped closer to the artifact, her hand hovering just above it, trembling with the enormity of the decision. The younger Seren recoiled, her face twisted with confusion. But we've come so far. We've sacrificed everything for this. You can't just throw it away. Seren stood still, her eyes fixed on the artifact, her hand still trembling. I know it's hard, she whispered, her voice barely audible. But if we don't stop it now, if we don't destroy it, everything will be lost. Both worlds, our futures, gone. Just like that. But just as she reached for the device to initiate the destruction, the artifact flickered, and the ground beneath them trembled violently. The space around them warped like a thin sheet of glass, bending under immense pressure. Seren's body felt as though it was being torn in two, the reality she knew stretching and distorting around her. "It's not working," she gasped, her words barely escaping her lips. "What's happening?" The younger Seren exclaimed, her voice full of panic. "Why isn't it working? We should be able to stop it." "It's not stopping because it's not just here," Seren whispered, realization dawning on her. "The artifact is linked to the future. It's drawing power from there." The younger Seren stared at her in disbelief. "The future, but that's impossible. How can it reach the future?" "It's been doing this since the moment we met," Seren said, her voice heavy with regret. "Our meeting triggered the artifact. It's been drawing energy from the full moon, from the moment we arrived here, from both of our worlds." The artifact's pulse grew stronger, and the air around them shimmered with the force of the power it was channeling. The younger Seren's form began to flicker, her body stretching and twisting, becoming unstable, just like the space around them. "This can't be happening," the younger Seren muttered, stepping back, her form flickering as if she was being pulled apart. "I've almost completed it, just one final step, but I can't figure out how to activate it." Seren felt her heart race as she looked at her past self. The realization hit her like a ton of bricks. "The full moon," she whispered. "It's the key. The moment we arrived here on the night of the full moon. It's what triggered it." The younger Seren's eyes widened in shock. "It's the same day as in the future. The full moon. That's what I missed," she said, realization dawning on her face. "And the artifact is connecting our worlds." Seren continued, feeling the overwhelming force of the connection. "It's using the energy of the full moon to link the past and future. It's drawing power from both realities." "But it's too powerful now," the younger Seren said, her voice cracking with fear. "We can't stop it, can we?" Seren's heart broke as she looked at her past self, knowing that their worlds were now intertwined beyond their control. "I don't know if we can," she whispered, "but we have to try. We have to stop it before it destroys everything." Seren's hands trembled as she stood next to the artifact, unable to move. The space around her felt heavy, distorted. The artifact, its energy still fluctuating wildly, had resisted every attempt to destroy it. Both Serens had tried everything, every possible method to break it, to stop it, but nothing had worked. She looked at her younger self, whose face was twisted in frustration, her hands clenched into fists. The younger Seren's eyes were wide with fear, but also with the kind of resolve that only someone who knew the stakes could have. "What do we do now?" she asked, her voice trembling with uncertainty. Seren took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. "We have to focus. There has to be a way. We've come too far to give up now." She turned to the artifact, her eyes narrowing in determination. "We need to end this together." With newfound resolve, the two Serenes joined their hands, closing their eyes and focusing all their energy on the artifact. "I am the master, heed my command. Close the space gate." They both shouted in unison, their voices vibrating with authority. The artifact began to tremble in response, its light flickering, then slowly fading. The space around them shuddered, and the distorted images began to stabilize, returning to their natural forms. Slowly but surely, the artifact began to break apart. The fragments scattered, turning to dust, dissipating into the air. The light that had been blinding and overwhelming faded completely. The younger Seren sighed in relief, her body relaxing as the tension melted away. She turned to the older Seren with a wide grin. "We did it," she said, her voice full of joy. "We actually did it." But when the younger Seren turned to look at her older self, she froze. The older Seren's form was flickering, her edges blurring, as if she were made of smoke, and her features were becoming indistinct. "No," the younger Seren whispered, her heart sinking. "Not now." It's happening," the older Seren said, her voice faint as she began to fade more quickly. She took a step back, her form flickering in and out of focus. "The past is changing. The future is changing." "No," the younger Seren cried out, reaching out toward her. "You can't go. You can't leave." The older Seren smiled faintly, her image now barely visible. "It's okay," she whispered. "This was always meant to happen. It was the price of saving both worlds." The younger Seren reached out one last time, her eyes filled with tears. "Please don't go. You've done so much for me, for all of us." The older Seren's figure began to dissipate into the air, her voice soft and distant. "Thank you, Seren," she said with a final quiet breath. "You've done more than you could ever know." And with those final words, the older Seren vanished completely, leaving the younger Seren standing alone in the quiet, empty space. The worlds now stabilized would carry on, but Seren would never be the same. Meanwhile, in the future, Xander stood alone on the bridge of the ship, looking out into the void. His expression was distant, his thoughts far away. He had seen the same events unfold, but from a different perspective. He had watched as the portal closed, as the artifact was destroyed. And yet, despite the victory, a deep sense of loss gnawed at him. It was as if something had been taken from him, something irreplaceable. Back in the ancient world, the younger Seren stood silently reflecting on the price they had paid. She knew that everything had changed. The artifact, once a symbol of power, was now nothing more than a pile of dust. But at what cost? The world had been saved, but it had been forever altered. The team members gathered around, silent and unsure of what to say. They had all seen the incredible sacrifice Seren had made, but none of them could truly understand the depth of what had just occurred. They had saved the worlds, but at what cost? Xander, still standing in the future, his hands gripping the railing, finally spoke, his voice breaking the silence. "We did it," he said, though there was no joy in his words. "But did we save ourselves?" Annie stood still for a moment, her eyes scanning the horizon. "I don't know," said softly, "but I do know that we've done something important, something that will change everything." They stood there in silence, each of them coming to terms with the loss, the sacrifice, and the change that had swept through their lives. The worlds were safe, but at a cost that none of them could fully comprehend. The journey had ended. The chaos, the danger, the uncertainty, it was all behind them now. The worlds had been saved, the artifact destroyed, and yet for the members of the team, something fundamental had changed within them. Each of them, in their own way, had been marked by the events they had witnessed, the sacrifices they had made, and the lives they had touched. As they parted ways, each one of them returned to their respective lives, the weight of the journey never far from their hearts. Xander, ever the strategist, had returned to a quieter existence, though he could never forget the price of their victory. He spent his days helping rebuild the parts of their world that had been torn apart, but his nights were filled with restless thoughts about the alternate reality they had saved and the cost of doing so. Seren, the younger one, found herself returning to her work, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something deep inside her had changed. She couldn't explain it, but it was as if a piece of her was missing, like a part of her soul had been left behind in the other reality. Her hands would sometimes tremble as she worked, as if she could still feel the weight of the decisions they had made. "I wonder if it was all worth it," she thought one evening, sitting alone in her office. The world around her was peaceful, but the memories of the journey lingered in her mind. The echoes of the full moon, the artifact's power, and the sacrifice of her older self, they never truly left her. But even as she thought about it, a sense of peace settled over her. The world was still turning. The lives of the people they had saved would continue. She had done her part, and now it was time to let go. Yet despite this feeling of resolution, something within her stirred. A fleeting image appeared in her mind, an image of herself standing before the artifact, sacrificing everything. She blinked, unsure of the vision she had just experienced. It was as if a memory that didn't belong to her had just surfaced. She shook her head, brushing it off. It was just a dream, a fleeting thought that would soon fade away. "No need to think too much about it," she whispered to herself, trying to dismiss the strange feeling. And yet, deep inside her, a small part of her wondered if the sacrifice she had made, the events they had endured, would ever truly leave her. Would they fade into the past, or would the ripples of their choices continue to echo through her life? In another world, in a place where time did not follow the same rules, Seren continued her life as an ordinary person. She woke up every morning, went to work, lived a life that seemed so far removed from the chaos and adventure she had once known. Yet sometimes, just as she was going about her day, a fleeting image would appear, her older self smiling at her, her eyes filled with gratitude. Seren would pause for a moment, the strange sense of loss rising within her again, but she quickly pushed it aside. She didn't know what it meant, but for now it didn't matter. She was content. She had done what was needed, and the world continued on. It was enough for now. And as Seren continued her day working with a smile on her face, the echoes of the past of the worlds they had saved of the sacrifices made lingered in the corners of her mind. She would carry them silently forever, knowing that what they had done would echo across both worlds in ways she could never fully understand. As Seren continued her ordinary life, she often wondered if she would ever truly understand the depth of her sacrifice. The worlds they had saved were safe, but the cost had been more than just a moment in time. The memories of the journey, the choices, the battles, the people they had met would always be with her, and though she moved forward, she knew that she could never fully leave the past behind. She smiled softly as she walked through the bustling city streets, the sun setting on another day. The world was at peace, and though it had come at a great cost, she found solace in the thought that she had done what was necessary. But in the depths of her heart, she would always carry the weight of that choice, a choice that would echo through both worlds forever.